We're focusing on the Prime Minister's visit to USA. Now, he addressed a joint sitting of the Congress for the second time on Thursday night. In an almost one-hour speech, Prime Minister touched upon a variety of themes. They were met with applause and standing ovations several times by the US Congress members, including Vice President Kamala Harris. Later, US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden hosted the Prime Minister for an official state dinner at the White House. The event was attended by around 400 eminent guests, including business tycoons Anand Mahindra and Mukesh Ambani. What has grabbed headlines, though, is the fact that the Prime Minister was asked a question on minority rights in a press conference after making a joint statement post the bilateral. This question has been raised by some civil rights and other groups, plus some Congress members during his trip. It's fair to say this is a question that has been chasing Narendra Modi since he became the Prime Minister in 2014. First up, let's listen in to how he responded to that question.
लोकतंत्र को हम जीते हैं और हमारे पूर्वजों ने उसको शब्दों में ढाला है संविधान के रूप में, और हमारी सरकार लोकतंत्र के मूलभूत मूल्यों को आधार लेकर के बने हुए संविधान के आधार पर चलती है। मुझे आश्चर्य हो रहा है कि आप कह रहे हैं कि लोग कहते हैं नहीं, भारत डेमोक्रेसी है। और जैसा राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन ने कहा, भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। लोकतंत्र हमारा स्पिरिट है, लोकतंत्र हमारी रगों में है, लोकतंत्र को हम जीते हैं। कास्ट, क्रीड, रिलीजन, जेंडर, किसी भी भेदभाव को वहां जगह नहीं होती है। और जब हम लोकतंत्र की बात करते हैं, तब अगर ह्यूमन वैल्यूज नहीं है, ह्यूमैनिटी नहीं है, ह्यूमन राइट्स नहीं है, फिर तो वो डेमोक्रेसी है ही नहीं। और इसलिए जब आप डेमोक्रेसी कहते हैं, जब डेमोक्रेसी को स्वीकार करते हैं और जब हम डेमोक्रेसी को लेकर के जीते हैं, तब डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का कोई सवाल ही नहीं उठता है।
So the big question is, has the Prime Minister answered the critics on the minorities question well enough and enough for this question to now be rested? I take that forward with a special guest joining. Dr. Jitendra Singh, MOS Science and Technology and Space, amongst others, is joining us. I do welcome you and thanks a lot for your time. Before I get to the question I was talking about, I want to ask you a couple of things related to space and its exploration. India is going to be part of the Artemis Accord now. This brings together like-minded nations in the field of space exploration. So I want to understand from you, what do you think this means for Indian space exploration?
I think broadly speaking, in layman's language, I think this is an acceptance, acknowledgement, recognition of India's space capabilities, India's space prowess. And a matter of great pride for India, also vindication that we started our space journey many, many years after the USA did. In fact, when USA was preparing to land a human being on the surface of moon, which it did in 1969 in the form of Neil Armstrong, we were still singing nursery rhymes like Chande Mama Dur Ke, and we were also very, very deficient as far as our resources were concerned. Sarabhai there are pictures of Sarabhai carrying a launcher on the carrier of his bicycle. But I think it's a quantum jump which has happened in the last 8-9 years, because Prime Minister Modi took a number of series of unorthodox decisions, like opening up the gates of Sriharikota to private participation, etc., etc. As a result of which today, USA is looking up to India as an equal partner. So it's not only that we would be benefiting from their inputs, they would be equally benefiting from our inputs, our expertise and our experience as far as our space missions and space success stories are concerned.
Well, you're right. India has come a long way, and especially in doing this in a budget that boggles the mind of the rest of the world. But the other big thing is that NASA and ISRO are now going to be collaborating on a joint mission. That has excited a lot of people in India. How important do you think that is?
Yeah, actually, US had an international space station, and they have a very ambitious plan to return the human to the moon by 2025 or so. And and this is located about, say, 250 miles, because Americans follow the metric system of miles. We follow kilometers, so maybe about 350 kilometers from Indian point of view, from the surface of Earth. So closer to moon and also closer to other planets. So it will be easier to discover the mysteries, the other elements related to the milieu around the moon, and subsequently also the other planets like Mars, etc. And the joint mission means that India possibly would be also offering one of its astronauts to accompany the US astronaut. And that will be a collective approach, signifying not only the synergism in our scientific knowledge, but also synergism in our common goals as far as mankind is concerned. And from the Indian point of view, it gives India a much, much wider global play field.
Okay. Minister, let me come to the question that a lot of people are debating in India today. Yesterday, the Prime Minister took questions in a press conference. I'm sure there were a lot of attacks even before it, that the Prime Minister, doesn't do press conferences much. I think, of course, he has done in the past, but the opposition was quick to remind he hasn't done one in 9 years. He was expectedly asked the question on minority rights in India. Do you think he responded to the critics that have existed for the last 9 years? Some of them say that he dodged the question.
No, I think there could not have been a more appropriate answer, because Prime Minister actually, when he said that as long as we accept that India is a democracy, as long as we accept that India is follows a constitution, the best constitution in the world, I think the question about minorities being treated otherwise or treated this way or that way does not arise. And besides that, I'm sure you and I would also agree that the so-called minorities in this country find themselves better placed, better positioned than their counterparts in several other countries, including the countries where there are the majority. So, absolutely, Prime Minister was right in saying that this question does not arise at all. India is not only a democracy, it's also mother of democracy. India is now a fountainhead of democracy. It's also a role model of democracy for the rest of the world. And in a democracy, talking about discrimination is incompatible to the inherent principles or the bottom lines of democracy.
But can I ask you a follow-up to that, Jitendra ji? The question that comes to mind is that this government has been in power for 9 years. We are barely a year to go to the next elections. And this question keeps chasing the BJP government at the center, the Prime Minister-led government at the center. Is it not a problem that this question chases your government and the government hasn't been able to counter it effectively?
It's not that. I think there's a huge amount of motivation behind it, and there are certain elements which thrive on harping on these issues. If they won't, they would not survive, and even their political existence would be would not be compatible to the kind of path that they've envisaged for themselves. So it's not something that they don't know. They know that they know, but they still don't wish to know. It's like that. And as far as the minorities or the other issues are concerned, just remember, before 2014, what was it like? I think the best way to appreciate it is to compare it to what it was before 2014. There's a huge amount of pessimism across the country. There's a huge amount of cynicism in a common Indian citizen, regardless of his religion, caste, and everybody was the youth was looking forward to go abroad, etc., etc. I wrote a small blog that day on the evening of 26 May 2014, soon after Prime Minister Modi was sworn in towards the twilight at 6 o'clock or so. I said this is the beginning of the journey from pessimism to optimism. It's now the other way around. Those of the youngsters, regardless of whichever community they belong to, have gone abroad, are looking back to come to India. And don't you remember during the COVID times, when or during the Ukraine war, when Prime Minister facilitated the return of several of the Ukraine students back to India, it was the Pakistani students who were introducing themselves as Indians. So it's the other way around now. They are taking refuge in the better milieu provided by India, and the better acceptance that Indians have across the world. So I think the facts are quite contrary to the motivated or the manufactured opinions generated from time to time.
Okay, so even as
And the lobby is the same which does this.
the lobby, okay. So even as you talk about this motivated section that says this against the Prime Minister and your government, there was an opposition meeting earlier today where a lot of the opposition parties came together and they believe that they can, if they come together, they can beat Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the NDA in 2024. What are your comments on that?
Now, do you want me to take that seriously or even respond to that? A, they themselves don't know who's their leader. B, they don't see eye to eye. C, this will end up as a photo opportunity, just make news for a day or so. And fourth, the very fact that they have come together is actually an indication of their desperation and their admission of their admission of the fact that they are not equal to Prime Minister Modi and don't have the capacity to stand up to Prime Minister Modi.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it on that note. Jitendra Singh, thanks a lot for joining us on our top story. Let's take it to some other guests. The Prime Minister is sitting down with a lot of the members of the business community in a short while from now. Sameer Lalwani is Senior Fellow and Director of the South Asia Program at the Stimson Center. Sunil Alag is Managing Director, SK Advisors. So a lot of the politics and diplomacy has been discussed. So far, all of the deals that the Prime Minister or the Indian contingent, the Indian government has managed to bag, would you say that this trip of the Prime Minister has been successful business-wise? And has there been an elephant in the room, that elephant being China? And is this why the US is doing what it's doing in its partnerships with India? Sameer.
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm actually with the U.S. Institute of Peace these days. And I agree that there is actually a dragon in the room, and that is certainly China. It has a lot to do with the defense cooperation that's maturing between the U.S. and India. It's also a lot of what's driving the supply chain resilience and friendshoring that you're seeing with investments in semiconductors and jet engine technologies and other investments that are trying to take place, open RAN, 5G wireless, telecommunications. So for all those reasons, yes, it's being driven by China. China's behaved very aggressively in the Indo-Pacific. It's coerced its neighbors. It's intruded on their territory, encroached on their airspace, and tried to strong arm and bully its trade partners and its neighbors. So for all those reasons, I think there's a certain amount of alarm in the region, and the U.S. and India see eye to eye on wanting to balance that power in Asia and to create a stable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. Sunil Alag, I also want to take your comments. As far as the business end, the trade deals are concerned, would you say this trip of the Prime Minister has been successful?
You're asking me?
Yes. Sunil Alag, go ahead.
Yeah. Look, America will always, United States will always look for its own interests, and so will Prime Minister Modi look for India's interests. And it's perfectly okay for them to get together now because it serves both ends. And therefore, our business of attracting income and attracting investments and attracting technology is very much there. And America, it suits America as well to carry on and having a good relationship with India because our economy is growing, and therefore it's a win-win for both.
Mm-hmm. But what is it about this, this relationship, do you think, is more enduring than some of the other aspects? Because yes, this is also guided by diplomacy. But when America rolls out the red carpet, when President Biden, heaps praises on India, yes, I know India is emerging as the bright spot as far as the global economy is concerned. Is it just that, or is it more? Is it also about what India offers to the world?
Look, as far as I'm concerned, no matter what we offer to the world, everywhere the United States has been quite selfish and India has been very selfish as well. Because when Russia offered oil at a lower price and at a discount, we took it. And we answered America saying, look, it's not in your interest, but it's in ours. And therefore, today, America has come to India because we are an economy and they are worried about China. And therefore, they need to spread themselves out. Look, America has, the Democrats especially, have never been for India. They've always been for Pakistan. They've always been for someone else. And whether they come in today is not a question that we should feel very happy about. It's in their interest and our interest. As long as it's a win-win situation, the US will support India.
So you think this is a win-win situation, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. Has India extracted its pound of flesh as much as US would?
Yes, I think so. I think they have. I mean, look, it helps them. And as far as we are concerned, it helps us. So look, we've got our pound of flesh. And Mr. Modi is very well. Every time he leaves India, whether it's the UK, I've just come back from London, and no matter where he goes, he is today a statesman. And therefore, America as well as the rest of the world looks upon him as such. Okay, and so is India growing under him. And that's it.
Samir was laughing when I said that, when I used the phrase, has India extracted its pound of flesh? Samir, you want to expand that also from your expertise? Because, you know, India also has concerns with the belligerent China. There's a tech transfer for a jet engine that has been spoken about and being done for the very first time. These are things India wanted, but they weren't given to India.
I think you're right. So, look, let's go back to this pound of flesh metaphor. I mean, I think that's the kind of language that China uses. The win-win story is the kind of language that China uses. And if we go down that path, I'm not sure how constructive the relationship will be. But if we talk about it in terms of transactions between partners that are trying to build each other's strengths and to collaborate for stability and deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, I think that's a more productive path to go down. You're right that there is a landmark deal for jet engine technology transfer and co-production in India. That is a significant move that has not been done by previous administrations, Republican or Democrat. That speaks to the moment and speaks to sort of the intensity of the pressure that China is placing on the Indo-Pacific, but also the Herculean efforts from the U.S. government and political system to make this happen. This is not something that the United States has shared with any other partner, and it is the highest level of technology that India has ever received, including any of the collaboration they had with Russia for 60 plus years of technology cooperation. So it's a big deal from the United States standpoint, and we shouldn't be shy about transactions. Transactions can be done between friends. In fact, the U.S. and the UK have been the closest of friends, have done many transactions together because that's the basis of friendship. I do something for you, you do something for me. In this case, I think the U.S. is not looking for a pound of flesh from India. What it's looking for is for India to step up in the Indo-Pacific, to share greater burdens in the Indo-Pacific, to take on more maritime patrols in the Indian Ocean, to stand up to Chinese political coercion and economic influence, not just at home, but also in its neighborhood and abroad. And India is starting to do that, but I think the United States would like to see India do more. We'd like to see greater collaboration between our navies and our air forces. We'd like to see greater intelligence cooperation, intelligence sharing, and dissemination. We have this Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, which is a great start. It's about collecting open source data on maritime traffic and subsurface traffic and sharing it with the rest of the region so they can all be aware of any dark shipping activities that are taking place in the Indian Ocean, including a lot of Chinese vessels that are conducting illegal fishing, drug trafficking, smuggling, but also gray zone coercion. So I think there's a lot to be done operationally between the two countries. This is not just about building machines and airplanes and military equipment, but it's also about doing the hard work of military cooperation and deterrence activities that will create uncertainty for China and in the end ultimately prevent them from aggressing against its neighbors, whether it's India or Taiwan.
I don't disagree with you, but we can say it in any other language. US also needs something from India, and that is why it is offering something to India. I think that's the only point that one was making. Whether those are shared interests in terms of business alone or of security, Asia Pacific, etc., we can divide that. But I think fundamentally a lot of people in India feel that US is more welcoming now of India because it is India is the bright spot. India is the big economy that is growing faster than anybody else. And also because they do need a partner to face China. But I'm running out of time. Samir, I'll give you a final 30, 40 seconds. How do you think the Indo-US relationship will shape the coming world?
I think it can shape the coming world by setting standards for a rules-based order, right? Collaborating on enforcing the rules of the international system that have worked for the last 70 years. And that's when it comes to technology, digital public infrastructure, when it comes to security and openness of the maritime commons and freedom of navigation overflight. But I want to say one last thing, which is that I think sometimes it's said too much that somehow both countries absolutely need each other. They may not. It may not be that the United States needs India desperately. Okay. It may be more that it would be a much more productive capacity to be able to collaborate together. But at the end of the day, if we have to go our separate ways, we can live with that, but we're much stronger together.
No, absolutely. No disagreement there. Sunil Alagh, your final comment, 30 seconds, on the way India is rising and the way its economic and business power is also being recognized. And I think this visit is a testament to that.
Yeah, as far as American politics and American business work, not necessarily in the same direction all the time. Look, I've been trying to tell them to come to India for the last 10 years, but it's never worked. I mean, they've always preferred China because it's cheaper and they prefer a stable government there. But now Apple has moved here and everybody is moving here now because they want two centers. Basically, business does not want to rely on just one area, which is China. And therefore, it suits them to come across and it suits us. I go back to my point of regardless of what might say, but what the American business needs India and India needs the American business on technology, on money, on everything else. And therefore, it's a win-win today. What happens in the next 5 to 10 years? Nobody knows.
Yeah. Well, India has to continue to grow well and continue to provide the world a feeling that there is good governance going on. And that's when all of this happens. It doesn't really happen in a vacuum. And just because there are issues in China. I do thank both of our guests for joining us, Sameer and Sunil. Thanks a lot for your comments. On the other side of a short break, we will get you an excerpt from the Prime Minister's historic speech to the joint session of the US Congress. Some of the highlights coming up.